Cinderella was now 75 years old. After a long, happy life with the late prince, she spent her golden years peacefully rocking on her porch, watching the world drift by. Her only companion was her old gray cat, Alan. One bright afternoon, a familiar shimmer of light appeared before her. It was the fairy godmother. Cinderella gasped. "What are you doing here after all these years?" The fairy godmother smiled kindly. "My dear Cinderella, you have lived a good and virtuous life. I have decided to grant you 3 wishes. Tell me, what does your heart still long for?" Overjoyed, Cinderella thought for a moment, then whispered her first wish. "I wish to be wealthy beyond imagination." In an instant, her humble wooden rocking chair turned to solid gold. The old cat Alan leapt off her lap, startled, and crouched near the porch rail, his fur bristling. "Oh, thank you, fairy godmother," Cinderella exclaimed. "It's the least I can do," said the fairy godmother. "Now, what is your second wish?" Cinderella looked down at her wrinkled hands and said softly, "I wish to be young and beautiful once more." A warm light enveloped her, and suddenly her youth returned, her skin smooth, her hair golden, her heart racing with the vigor of a life renewed. She laughed, feeling a vitality she hadn't felt in decades. The fairy godmother nodded. "You have one final wish. Choose wisely." Cinderella glanced toward Alan, who was still trembling in the corner, and smiled. "I wish for Alan, my faithful cat, to become a handsome young man." In a flash of light, Alan transformed before her eyes. When the glow faded, there stood a man of breathtaking beauty, tall, graceful, and radiant. Cinderella could hardly speak as the fairy godmother waved her wand one last time and disappeared in a burst of blue sparks. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Alan stepped closer, his eyes glinting mischievously. He leaned down, wrapped his strong arms around her, and whispered softly into her ear, his warm breath brushing her golden hair. "I bet you regret having me neutered now, don't you?" A priest, a thief, and an engineer are sentenced to death by guillotine. The executioner tells the priest he may say one last thing. The priest bows his head and prays, asking God to spare his life. When the lever is pulled, the blade jams halfway down. According to the law, if the guillotine fails, the prisoner is set free, so the priest walks away unharmed. Next comes the thief. Having seen what happened, he too prays for divine mercy. Once again, the blade refuses to fall. The thief is released as well. Finally, it's the engineer's turn. Instead of praying, he studies the guillotine carefully. Just as the executioner prepares to pull the lever, the engineer points upward and says, "Oh, I see the problem." Frank, who's been hard of hearing for years, recently bought a brand new hearing aid, and he couldn't be happier. When he runs into his friend Joe, he can't wait to brag a little. "Hey Joe," Frank says, "remember that old hearing aid I had? The one with the receiver in my shirt pocket? I was always fiddling with it, trying to turn up the volume. Well, not anymore. This new one has opened up a whole new world for me. I'm hearing things I never heard before. Everything's crystal clear. I got it wholesale for only $1,000. Every company that makes this model wants me to do commercials for them, and I'd do it for free. I can even hear a pin drop on a carpet in the next room." Joe smiles and says, "That's amazing, Frank. What kind is it?" Frank looks at his watch and says, "About 4:15. A ball of string rolls into a bar and takes a seat. He asks the bartender for a drink. The bartender shakes his head and says, "Sorry, we don't serve strings here." Confused and disappointed, the string rolls back home. A few days later, he decides to try again. He rolls into the bar, this time sitting at the far end. "Can I get a drink?" he asks. The bartender squints and says, "Hey, aren't you that string from the other day? I told you, we don't serve strings here." The string sighs and leaves once more. Weeks pass. The string gets an idea. He ties himself into a knot and frays the top of his ends to disguise himself. Confident, he rolls back into the bar and orders a drink. The bartender eyes him suspiciously. "You look familiar. Haven't I seen you before? Aren't you that string from a while back?" The string looks him dead in the eye and says coolly, "Nope, I'm afraid not.